Should I start? Yeah. So you guys are gluttons for punishment, huh? You just had a very deep philosophical talk, and then you went to the philosophy breakout. I also don't remember Josh ever said, but admittedly I don't read Josh's emails, but I don't remember him ever saying that the breakouts, like the deep theory was going to happen in the plenaries, and the breakout I was supposed to make it super practical. I've got this down here, but like pastors, when they have their application points at the end, we may or may not, like, this is where you guys come in. I'm going to sort of hand wave you and throw some things out in terms of implications for classical ed, but mostly I'm going to say, here are my deep 30,000 feet thoughts on this issue, and then you guys go apply it, basically. Hopefully that will be helpful. Okay, so starter question by a show of hands. How many of you know your students are regularly cheating using AI? Oh, okay, good. Maybe less of you then. How many of you are worried that they might be, but you have no idea how to check anyway? How many of you are elementary school teachers? Ah, okay. Yeah. So my sense is that there would be a lot more hands up if it was middle school and high school students, teachers. And inevitably this is a question that's coming up a lot, and is a very practical question. Winston Brady, many of you know, wanted to talk about this issue about a year or so ago. The practical question of how do we prevent students from using ChatGPT to write their papers and so on. And I thought it was sort of philosophically beneath me, as it were, to kind of engage with that. Winston, I want to talk about some. So he was organizing some kind of mini conference or workshop or something, round table. Winston, I didn't say this to him exactly, but I want to talk about the deep philosophical things of is AI going to take over and meld with our brains, or we're all going to be cyborgs or whatever? And you want to talk about the practicals of these sorts of questions, right? But these are the questions that that are confronting us right now, and that teachers and parents have. How do we prevent students from cheating and plagiarizing? What does cheating even mean in a world where, maybe not yet, but soon it will be the case that we're supposedly going to be using AI all the time in our everyday lives? What kind of employment should we be preparing our students for? What kind of skills will they need? Will they be the ones that we're actually right now preparing them for, and so on? These seem like very practical questions and sort of beneath me as the philosopher, and aside from that being sort of arrogant and silly. I meant to start my timer so I don't go wildly over. I also realized sort of after that, so I think Winston did plan something. There was something that happened last year, which I'm sure was a great event. But more recently, I've sort of realized that actually there is this deep philosophical question kind of under the surface of these practical questions. That if you haven't started thinking about this, I think people increasingly are going to be thinking about in education, and it's causing a lot of educators to sort of be losing sleep about, which is this deep worry. Soon humans will no longer be, so they tell us anyway, soon humans will no longer be the smartest things in our world. And this will make, here's the worry anyway, this will make an education in the traditional sense obsolete, or at least the traditional methods of educating obsolete. And I think the deep worry should push us to ask this question I'm calling the AI education question. What is the point of educating young people to be the best thinkers and most knowledgeable they can be if AI will surpass us in nearly every intellectual benchmark? A couple of things to note. I mean, this is not a rhetorical question. So this is not like another way of just stating the worry, right? That the education is going to be obsolete. So when I say, what is the point? I'm not saying, what is the point? Like, the assumption is that it's obsolete. It's a genuine question. For those of us who don't think a traditional education is obsolete or will become obsolete, that it will still be of immense value, we need to answer this question then. Right? It's not a rhetorical question, it's a real question. Well, what is going to be the point? If AI gets better and better, and not just that AI will be such great reasoners and so on, but that it's ubiquitous. It's going to be everywhere, and it's going to be readily accessible to everybody. Right? So you don't need, why go to the library and take out the dusty old copy of the encyclopedia when you've got Google in your pocket, right? Right? So in the same token, why do the hard work of learning how to be a great thinker if AI can just do it for you, right? Again, I think that there is a point to education, but we need to answer that question. So So that's the deep, I think, interesting philosophical question. Here is a terrible answer that I'm seeing. Apologies for the long quote. This is a kind of, I'm stringing a couple of quotes together from various places. I could have quoted more. I'm seeing this kind of everywhere in people writing online. Quote, most humans will be working, so this is kind of a prediction about the very near future. Most humans will be working with AI every day in their jobs. The AI will know most things about the job better than the humans. Every single workday, or maybe even every single hour, you will be reminded that you are doing the directing and the filler tasks. The AI cannot, but it is doing most of the real thinking. We don't doubt that many people will be fine with that, and in many cases relieved to have so much of the intellectual burden removed from their shoulders. There will also be more coaches, mentors, and individuals who supply the services of inspiration. The AIs may be better therapists than humans, but lots of times we will still desire human contact in our interactions, if only to satisfy our biological programming. We also can expect more humans to work as greeters, charmers, and flatterers. So mom and dad, don't worry, little Johnny's going to have a great future ahead of him as a greeter, a charmer, and a flatterer. Group hobbies and projects will proliferate. Human taste will also become more important. We don't doubt that the AIs can show great taste. Just try asking them about the best Mozart recordings. But for so many matters of taste, the key point is that it be yours. As information becomes less scarce, we will seek other qualities from our relationships and douse ourselves in vividness, meaning, and emotional connection through interpersonal connections. Given the ready tap of intelligence, we will place more value on other traits and value people more based on their style, charisma, generosity, kindness, beauty, etc. The longer-term trend is toward more leisure time, and AI is likely to accelerate that trend. Depending on the policies that governments implement, more people may choose to not work at all. Okay, so this is from Tyler Cowen, who's an economist at George Mason and a kind of well-known public intellectual. And I don't know how to say her name, Avital Balawit, who is a young woman who's executive at Anthropic, which is one of these big, a rival to ChatGPT, right? I think one of these big AI companies. These are their predictions. And this is Cowan in another article, therefore applying it to education. If the current AI can cheat effectively for you, the current AI can also write better than you. In other words, our universities are not teaching our citizens sufficiently valuable skills, rather we are teaching them that which can be cloned at low cost. The AIs are already very good at those tasks, and they will only get better at rapid pace. In other words, don't bother, don't bother with it. Rather, personal networking will continue to rise in importance. Higher education will persist as a dating service, a way of leaving the house, and a chance to party and go see some football games. It also will become all the more important as a path to building out a personal network of peers. The ostensible mission of college, learning, will become ever more optional. Many students will seize the opportunity to study with their AI models, liberated from the onerous demands of having to write all those A-quality papers themselves. The best among the professors will learn to be inspirational mentors, coaches, and networking connectors. I'm seeing a trend here. Okay, here's someone else. Why do you want your kids to be educated? What is the purpose of education? Because actually, now that we have AI that can write essays and pass the bar exam and do AP exams just as good or better than kids, we have to really rethink the purpose of education. Fair enough. That's the question I'm asking as well. Here's her answer. Learning to live with other people, learning to know yourself, and developing the flexible competencies to be able to navigate a world of uncertainty. Those are the whys for me. Here's one more quote. What happens in school? We often focus a lot on just the academic standards. Those skills matter, but to some degree, the more important skills are, can you deal with conflict? Can you be held accountable? Can you communicate? Can you know how to navigate social pressures? And I think those things are going to be even more important. And I think teachers, as the human beings in the room, this is imagining that there's going to be lots of AI tutors in the room as well. I think teachers, as the human beings in the room, are going to be super important actors. One just as a physical human being to hold students accountable, but also just to be able to unlock that person-to-person connection. Okay, so this terrible answer by very smart, prominent people. So this is, I said, Tyler Cowen and Avital Balawit, who's one of the executives at Anthropic. That's Sal Khan, who's famous, the founder of Khan Academy. And then this woman, Rebecca Winthrop, works for the Brookings Institution. So a prominent sort of policy institute. Smart people. And I might be, being uncharitable, sort of, overly simplifying what they were all saying. But this is basically, I think, what I call the good news, bad news response. And at least the spirit of what they're saying, again, this is maybe uncharitable and sort of oversimplification, but this is kind of the direction they're going, right? Bad news, developing human cognitive capacities to their fullest potential will soon be forever obsolete because we're going to have the AI doing all that. But good news, don't worry, you can still be somewhat useful by developing your soft skills, right? You can be inspirational, you can be a mentor and coach, right? And we're going to explore our sort of tastes and our hobbies and so on. And yeah, we're going to still want that kind of human connection. Now, there's nothing wrong with soft skills. Obviously, that's, and a lot of you guys, know that that's what you're doing in class. Of course, you're teaching the students how to get along with each other and the EQ and soft skills, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think this is a really dangerous message to be basically saying, well, all that cognitive hard work and developing our intellectual skills, that's kind of for the past. Okay, so can we do better? So I'm going to just kind of zoom out a little bit. So rather than just talking about education and the relationship between education and AI, we're talking about sort of the kind of theme of this conference, humanity, humanism, what it means to be a human in AI, sort of more generally. So here's kind of a claim I want to make. Foundational to any successful revival of humanistic education, which is what the conference is about, foundation to kind of a new humanism, will be providing a compelling anthropology. So insofar as the goal of humanism is the cultivation of flourishing human lives, foundational to that is an account, a compelling account, a true account of the nature, value, and purpose of human beings. So we've got to get really clear on that. And this is sort of this is sort of from a couple slides from another talk, and this is kind of I don't want to get sidetracked, and we could go a long time in this direction, but why think anthropology is so important? Well, it's my claim, and this is hardly an original claim. Lots of people have pointed out in the last couple of years that nearly all of the major cultural controversies in the contemporary West, in our civilization, are at bottom disagreements about the nature of the human person. Right? So if you don't believe me, you just think through this list, and we're not going to do it now, but these are all the big things that our culture, these hot button issues that our culture fights about. Some of them are more obvious than others. It's really clear in biomedical issues like abortion and others that those are issues of controversies about anthropology. Obviously, sex and gender issues, especially sort of most obviously transgenderism. But you could go right down the list. And notice at the bottom, technology. Technology is so disruptive, not just because of the incredible pace and that all of the changes sort of to every area of our life that it sort of threatens to make, but also because I think it kind of forces us to look in the mirror at this question of anthropology. Okay, what is it to be a human being, really? Right? And no technology more so in the last couple of years, of course, than artificial intelligence. So this is a very rough and ready, I'm not going to spend any time on this, and other people will disagree with this definition, but here's a kind of rough characterization of what AI is. The ability of computers to mimic human intelligence by performing tasks commonly associated with intelligent beings. And there's, again, just as there was a deep worry about AI in education, there's just, I want to say, a deep general worry about AI in general, which is something like this, right? And I think we probably, even if you haven't thought a lot about this, you've probably felt this a little bit, right? When you read the press reports anyway as to what AI is and what it's going to be. Maybe AI calls into question our assumptions about the unique place of humanity in the world. Okay. So that worry should prompt us to ask this question. So we had the AI education question. Here's the AI anthropology question. What does separate us from even the most sophisticated future artificial intelligence? So I should have said before, I didn't, but let's just assume that the sort of AI optimists are right about AI's ability to sort of where AI is going to go cognitively and its intelligence. I've got sympathy for people who are skeptical about that and push back, but let's just assume for the sake of the argument that AI is going to be, at least in some sense of the word intelligent, so far more intelligent than human beings and beat us not just at chess and at math problems and so on, but sort of so-called AGI, so just general intelligence. Just for the sake of, so you might be skeptical about that, and I am too, but for the sake of the argument, let's just assume that that's all true. What then? Is there anything else left that humans and the human mind in particular possesses that AI inevitably still will lack? That's the question. Okay, so here's the tactic of the rest of the talk. Answer the AI anthro question, this one that we just asked, and then use that answer to answer the other question about education. What's the value of education? So first, we're going to answer the question about AI, the AI anthropology question, by looking at this famous. Has anyone read or heard about this famous thought experiment in the past, the Chinese room? Yeah, a couple. I mean, it's good if you don't raise your hand. Sometimes you ask a question and students feel bad and they feel like they ought to, even though they don't really. They're embarrassed to say they had not exposed. But I'm always really happy when people don't raise their hand, so that I get to introduce these kind of things to a new audience. So this is a thought experiment. It goes back. It's pretty dated now. It goes back to the 1980s. By this guy, John Searle, who's a well-known philosopher. I kind of like that it's dated because it kind of shows that even though like the kind of technology they had back in the 80s, is dated now, that these kind of issues, kind of are timeless, or the kind of the point that he made then is still applicable 40 years later. And there's an argument against, at the time, what they called strong AI, which is similar to what now people are saying AGI. So basically AI that's comparable or surpasses kind of human intelligence and human abilities. So again, I'm just going to read Searle's breakdown of it. This is in a couple different places. Imagine that a bunch of computer programmers have written a program that will enable a computer to simulate the understanding of Chinese. So, for example, if the computer is given a question in Chinese, it will match the question against its memory or database and produce appropriate answers to the questions in Chinese. Suppose, for the sake of argument, that the computer's answers are as good as those of a native Chinese speaker. Now then, here's the question. Does the computer, on the basis of this, understand Chinese in the way that Chinese speakers understand Chinese? Well, imagine that you are locked in a room, and in this room are several baskets full of Chinese symbols. Imagine that you, like me, do not understand a word of Chinese, but that you are given a rule book in English for manipulating these Chinese symbols. So there you are in the middle of the room. The rules specify the manipulation of the symbols purely formally, in terms of their syntax, not their semantics. We'll come back to that distinction in a minute. So the rule might say, take a squiggle squiggle sign out of basket number 1 and put it next to a squaggle squaggle sign from basket number 2. Okay, or there are all these pictures of the Chinese room on Google that I found. So I found that's kind of an example of what the rule might look like. Now suppose that some other Chinese symbols are passed into the room and that you are given further rules for passing back Chinese symbols out of the room. Suppose that, unknown to you, the symbols passed into the room are called questions by the people outside the room, and the symbols you pass back out of the room are called answers to the questions. Suppose, furthermore, that the programmers are so good at designing the programs and that you are so good at manipulating the symbols that very soon your answers are indistinguishable from those of a native Chinese speaker. There you are, locked in your room, shuffling your Chinese symbols and passing out Chinese symbols in response to incoming Chinese symbols, right? So the income comes in, you kind of interpret it with the rule book, not knowing what the symbols mean, and then you pass out answers. This is kind of like ChatGPT, you might think, right? Okay. So here's the $50 million question. Does the non-Chinese speaker in the Chinese room, so imagine that's you, understand Chinese? Anyone want to say yes, it understands Chinese? Everyone agrees that, yeah. I mean, that what the thought experiment is designed to prompt. And of course, there's a lot of people coming back and say, well, in some sense, it at least behaves, the whole system behaves as if it's understanding Chinese from the outside and so on. But from the inside, if you're you're the function of the kind of computer CPU, right? You're running the program by shuffling around the symbols. Do you, or is there any other consciousness in there that, conscious being that understands Chinese, the meaning of the Chinese? Everyone agree that there's no Chinese understanding going on, at least not the way that a person would? Okay, so here's the moral of the story. That's, of course, what Searle wants you to say. So again, this was back in 1980. He made this point about people then who were talking about AI. Of course, they were a long way from getting it. So here's roughly the moral of the story. Without conscious awareness, the key is conscious awareness. Without conscious awareness, a digital computer can never understand the information it is processing. It has, here's the fancy distinction, it has syntax without semantics. Syntax without semantics. What's the distinction? Syntax is the rules for how to combine and manipulate the symbols of a language. It's basically like the rules of English grammar, for instance. Semantics, on the other hand, is the meanings of the language, what the symbols are actually about, like the vocabulary of English. Okay. So AI, or any computer program, like the person in the Chinese room, has a syntax, the rules for manipulating the symbols. It's actually complicated as to how AI works because it's what's called neural networks, and that's but anyway, just trust me, that complication doesn't matter for the sake of the point. Okay. When people ascribe meaningful content to those symbols, like the Chinese speakers outside the room, AI can be a powerful processor of that information, performing as if it were making conscious inferences. So we can ascribe meaning to the otherwise meaningless symbols. But AI itself lacks semantics. It has no idea what the symbols mean or even that it is manipulating symbols. That is because without a soul, the computer does not have a subjective point of view that is aware of thoughts or experiences about anything. Without consciousness, all is dark inside. Okay. This is what philosophers talk about when they talk about consciousness. They say there's something it's like to be a being that's conscious. There's a subjective point of view. You ever stop to pause and think about the miraculous nature of that? But there's something it's like to be you. There's a first-person point of view. There's nothing it's like to be a rock, right, or a table. There's something it's like for you to be you from the inside, and presumably something it's like to be a dog, or a blue whale, or a bat, or maybe even a honeybee. But there's nothing it's like to be a rock. There's ways that the rock is like. The rock has characteristics and attributes. It's gray and heavy and so on. But there's nothing it's like for the rock to be the rock. And likewise, there's nothing it's like for the AI agent to be an AI or a computer program to be a computer program. That's the big difference. So, the answer to the AI anthropology question. What separates us from even the most sophisticated future artificial intelligence? What, if anything, do human minds possess that AI inevitably will lack? My answer, at least one answer, there could be other answers to the question, right? But at least one thing is a conscious mind, conscious awareness, conscious experience. That's really important. Okay, so what I propose to do then is to now go back to the question about education. We're supposed to finish this, it goes to 12:15, right? I want to leave enough time for questions. I think I'm good. In fact, I think I'm sort of racing along to make sure I have enough time, which is rare for me. I usually, I'm always stopping my lecture halfway through with my students, never getting to the end. Okay. So again, just a reminder. So we answered the question, what's unique about us? Even in the best case, depending on how you look at it, best case or worst case for AI, but even with the AI optimists who think that AI is going to have general intelligence that far surpasses us, what is the thing they're going to lack? It's still going to lack conscious awareness. Okay. So back to the education question: what is the point of educating young people to be the best thinkers and most knowledgeable they can be of reaching the limits of their cognitive capacities, of working hard to become as smart as they can be, if AI is just going to be smarter anyway and it's going to be everywhere and it's can do the thinking for us? That was the question. Okay, here's a biblical response. I think this is a good response. Kind of two biblical passages. Like you can pick all sorts of verses, but two places. One, of course, is Genesis 1 and 2. And God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air and over every living thing that moves upon the earth." So the Genesis mandate. And following on Genesis 2, the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to till it and keep it. Right. And then a second passage from Mark: "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength." So we could sum this up by saying, why should we still care about education in the traditional sense and trying to be as smart as we can be, or trying to help our students be as smart as they can be in the age of AI? Two reasons: stewardship and worship. Number one, God entrusted with us dominion over the earth, not AI. So it would be a huge abdication of responsibility to turn over the decision-making of how the world's going to be run for that reason, right? We're the stewards, like Denethor and Minas Tirith, waiting for the return of the king. That's a Lord of the Rings reference. Okay, right, and it would be an abdication of responsibility to let AI run the show. Secondly, even beyond that, developing your cognitive capacities is itself an act of worship, that you're giving all of yourself, all that you are, to something higher than yourself, to God, or if you're not a Christian, to something higher than yourself. And that, of course, includes your intellectual capacities. Okay, the problem, it's not really a problem, but the limits of this answer is, of course, it's not going to be compelling to someone who doesn't think that the Bible is authoritative in their life. So can we speak, and Dr. Hankins was making the point that that's one role for the classics, is that it speaks to people beyond just the Christian worldview. So can we give a classical alternative? And there's good old Uncle Aristotle coming to our rescue as usual in these situations. So I think that there's a sort of alternatives for both 1 and 2, in sort of classical alternatives. So the alternative to talking in terms of stewardship of the earth, having a sort of responsibility and dominion over the earth, is just to talk about prudence or practical wisdom, or what Aristotle called phronesis, practical wisdom. Only humans can possess, I want to claim, practical wisdom needed to govern the world well, not AI. AI can behave prudently, but only if we program it to do so. Right? It doesn't have, it doesn't have loves or affections, right? So it doesn't have well-ordered ones. So we would need to give it well-ordered values, which requires the programmers to be prudent themselves. Okay, so we can't get away from the necessity of humans being prudent. Secondly, the Greek word eudaimonia, you may have come across, it just means the human flourishing or the good life. So the alternative to talking in terms of worship, of giving all of your life to God, is to talk about, well, giving all of your life to the pursuit of an objectively good life, to human flourishing, which isn't just sort of completely self-centered, but there's an objective standard outside of yourself, and you want to develop all of your capacities, including your intellectual cognitive capacities. Okay, that's constitutive for Aristotle. It's part and parcel of a good life. In fact, eudaimonia for Aristotle just is the virtuous exercise of your rational faculties throughout life. Okay. Objection. Why can't we have like a division of labor thing, right? Why can't humans outsource the jobs of governing the world and personal development to AI assistants? Okay. This is where the Chinese room comes back in. Right, so we have our kind of desires that they come from us, and then we let the AI assistants kind of figure out how to meet our desires, basically. Do all the hard thinking for us, right? Problem is, humans are conscious, but AI isn't. So let's take those one at a time. So why can't AI be prudent for us? Well, AI isn't conscious. But an essential part of prudence is the ability to perceive objective value in the world, and then to have the right emotional responses to that. So when you see injustice, you get angry. When you see suffering, you have compassion, and so on. Okay, and that requires conscious experience, that you're conscious of good and bad in the world. And then you have this conscious emotional experiences in response. Perceiving value requires consciousness, and prudent judgment relies on knowing what to value, ordering your loves. So it requires consciousness. So again, you might say, well, all right, so suppose we just put the inputs, like the initial gut kind of response of what we like, our values, and we just kind of stick them into the AI machine and say, okay, figure out how to balance these best and to maximize the things we want and to minimize the bad things in the world. The problem with that is that are those initial inputs of what's actually valuable and sort of relative to each other, are those going to be ordered, well ordered, as to actually getting right what's of higher value and lesser value, or not? If they already are well ordered, then we had to do that, because our initial kind of gut responses are often disordered, right, in life. And it takes prudence to discipline yourself, right? Initially, you just want to eat all the junk food you can, and so on, right? In life, you've got to order yourself. So that already requires prudence. If, on the other hand, humans aren't doing that, and it's just our kind of gut initial responses that we're plugging into the machine as our values, and then AI is supposed to do that, again, the problem is AI can't AI isn't conscious, so AI has no experience of value. AI can only reason based on what we're saying is the value. So a way to think about this is AI and computers are really good at things, if you think about it, like Google Maps, right? Like if you want a chicken sandwich, AI is going to, Google Maps is going to be really good at showing you how to do it. Go out here, go here, turn this way, get in your car, go down there, drive 2 miles, there's the Chick-fil-A. But AI isn't going to be able to tell you whether you should prefer the greasy chicken sandwich over a thin waistline. Like, what are the relative values of that, right? Like, they're both good, right? But how do we balance that? AI might be able to tell you, like, how many, maybe not yet, but soon, like, how many chicken sandwiches you could eat, say, a week before it becomes likely you're going to have a heart attack, right? But AI can't tell you whether the risk is worth it. Right? The only thing that can do that is someone who's conscious of value, and then who has the reasoning capabilities to kind of work through it. So prudence is something that has to come from us, and part of prudence is being conscious of the value, but then also having the cognitive capabilities of reasoning through stuff. You can't, one of the lessons from Aristotle is you can't separate out the reasoning capabilities from your experience of value, from the emotional responses and the perception of value in the world. Those things go together. AI only has the reasoning bit, it doesn't have the value bit. So humans are going to have to continue to do that. Okay. And then secondly, the second thing we said was, as an essential component of the good life, thinking about developing our intellectual capacities for that reason. And again, you might think, well, if I've got a little, AI thing in my earpiece or whatever, goggles or whatever, it's going to be on my body. Anytime I need any like hard, reasoning, problem to be solved, I'm just going to kind of consult it. The problem is that, again, is that AI isn't conscious, so it can't be sort of integrated within your conscious personhood. At best, it can be a tool that we use, that we call upon, but it's not something we can experience as integrated into our rational faculties. So AI can be super, super smart. Your AI assistant can be super, super smart, but you don't get the credit for that. You're not exercising that and practicing and working hard to work on your memory and working on your math skills so that you can call upon them and so on. It's not part of your rational faculties because it's not directly accessible to your conscious mind. Okay. The virtuous exercise of our rational capacities, which is part of the good life, must belong to us. It can't be just a tool outside of us in order for us to live a fulfilling life. You have to develop your mind, not just use AI as a tool. Okay, that's my case. That's a philosophical case. So we've actually got to the implications for classical education, which is where you guys come in, and you guys can give feedback of what you think about this. So this is usually, as a philosopher, I spend all 90% of the time on the theoretical stuff, and then at the end I've got to have some. Certainly, when I give talks here at Daly's Academy, they're like, oh, I've got to have some practical applications for the classroom. You guys are way more thoughtful and have more experience in how to teach. That's one of the kind of dark secrets of higher ed, is that no professors ever take any classes on how to actually teach, right? Which you might have experienced that in some of your college classes. They don't actually know how to teach all. They may or may not be good lecturers because if they're inspirational or something, but no one has actually learned how to do pedagogy. Anyway, so let's see what you guys think. Well, here's what I came up with. So 3 implications. Number 1, for the curriculum. So obviously don't get sucked into the bad news, good news lie that says that all our students will need to succeed in the future are soft skills. And again, it's not that most people are not going to, Tyler Cowen in that article was pretty kind of brazen about it. Most people are not going to be that blunt. That, basically you're going to, your future job, you're not going to be thinking at all. The AI is going to do all the thinking for you, so don't even worry, just network or whatever, Most people aren't going to say that, but there's going to be this slippage. Well, really what's important in the classroom, and this is why we still have teachers in the classroom. Well, AI assistants are going to, do all the teaching in a sense, but there's that human element to kind of be connected. No, reject that. The only reason that you're going to be in the classroom is to sort of bond with the kids emotionally or something, and that all that they're going to need in the future is soft skills. So I want to say, no, we're going in the opposite direction. Double down. Double down on times tables, diagramming sentences, memorization, recitation, rigorous logic, and so on. And not just kind of to be anti-progress or something like that, but because there's the value of learning these things, but there's also then the value of working your mind out like a muscle. And to see that that's like a part of a fulfilling life, is that you do something hard. In college, I failed my first intro logic, and I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't study, and I was very arrogant, and so I got an F on the logic midterm. Like, that had never happened to me before. Sort of a little existential crisis. Well, I worked really hard in the second half of that semester in logic, so I got an A on the final. And I think he was very, he did one of those things in the middle of the term where he weighted the final way more than the midterm, so that people like me who had gotten an F could get a B or something by the end. Great inflation. But that was hugely meaningful to me, right? Because I put in the hard work, and then I had that feeling of the hard work paying off as I kind of worked out my mental muscles. For the school, my suggestion is radical unplugging from technology on school grounds makes sense, and not as a kind of Ludditism, right? The Luddites are like anti-technological progress. I don't think that we're interested in that for its own sake, but as a counterbalance. If the rest of society is going really far in this direction, and again, we might see the value in learning how to use the technology and becoming sort of technologically literate. But in the school, I would say let's get all that stuff completely out of the school. For the first time, and I've sort of been shamed into this because I've seen other professors doing it. I should have done it ages ago. For the first time, I've banned my students taking notes on laptops in my classes this term. And so, it's a pain in the neck that they got to print out the readings instead of just having them, which is killing a lot of trees. Or people are printing stuff out, and they close their laptops and they're having to do written notes. But we're trying to create a space, not anti-technology for anti-technology's sake, but so that they can work their cognitive muscles. They can grow in intellectual and cognitive virtue separate from the technology. And thirdly, for the classroom, you as a teacher have a moral imagination. That's part of what it means to be conscious. It's that you can perceive moral value in the world, good and bad, and have appropriate or inappropriate responses to that. You have a moral imagination that the unconscious AI tools that supposedly are going to replace you guys in the classroom in a decade or two will never have. Which means that you will always be a better mentor to your students. And not just offering them emotional support and that kind of stuff, but teaching them prudence to properly order their values and their loves and what's actually important in life. So continually cultivate your moral imagination and theirs. I think that's it. Yeah, thanks for listening. I think we've got about 10 minutes, is that right? Because the lunch starts at 12:15. I guess no one wants to be at the back of the line at lunch, right? So we'll let out before 12:15. So we got plenty of time for questions, thoughts, advice about how to apply some of this in the classroom. Thoughts? Yeah.
I'd like you to just maybe talk about this a little bit, but you did touch on the fact that, let's go back to that Chinese room.
Yeah.
That person in the room got their rules from somebody.
Yep.
And you talked about the values and those pieces, right? So AI is getting its rules from something. When it goes out and grabs information, it has certain parameters, and somebody has programmed those parameters into that.
Right. Well, I mean, as I understand, it's not that one or two people are the programmers, so that's misleading, right? But it's learning on a huge amount of data that's basically all of human knowledge on the internet and stuff. I mean, it's learning from huge data sets of. Yeah, but go ahead.
And the point is that kids believe everything they read on the internet.
Yeah.
Right. And so can you speak to having a healthy skepticism about what you get from AI and being able to kind of see what is underlying the response you get? Yeah,
well, absolutely. I think right, so it starts with having a healthy skepticism of just stuff that's on the internet in general. I think we've all had a couple decades of experience with that. right? But AI is this new thing, and maybe it seems more legitimate than just Google searching or something, right? So yeah, I mean, I think you have to talk about that. I do worry a little bit about emphasizing too much within the classroom that they should be using these tools and get really proficient at determining when it, I think it's kind of, I think we as a society don't really understand where this is going yet, much less the kids. So I wouldn't want to talk too much about it in the classroom with the assumption in the sense that like, oh, we're all using these and you need to learn how to do it. I mean, obviously, we should be realistic that they are going to be using it to some degree. But yeah, you could, I imagine you could design lessons around examples of like, this is what AI said on this issue. And then now let's step back and let's actually talk about what we know historically or whatever, and to correct kind of the view that AI is giving, the answer that AI is giving. Yeah.
I'm just feeding off that, like, for us to teach our kids to look for the skeptical that's in there, that's the whole use of not using AI. There's no way they would be able to even try to find those errors if they could not think on their own, which is what I love about Thales and the classical part of it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, again, I can't stress enough. I'm not suggesting that in the future, that we're not all going to be using AI to some degree. I'm sure that's going to be the case. Like we all have, even if we hate these things, the little demon boxes in our pockets, we still have them, right? And they're not actually demon boxes, right? There's good things about them. So I think AI is going to, this isn't like a complete rejection of it, but I do think you have to seal off and have I hate to use the term, but safe space from the AI first, particularly when you're talking about young minds. I don't think there's really any way to we're going to responsibly integrate it, at least not until we really understand the technology. So I think any kind of, we're essentially having the kids be guinea pigs if we're going to have, if we're going to kind of experiment with the use of AI in the classroom anytime soon. I mean, I think that the lesson of the screens and the cell phones in the classroom, that we basically did this massive experiment on our kids in the last 15 years or so. And I think even secular people are really pulling back from having screens in the classroom as much. Everyone's realizing it was a bad idea before we fully understood the technology to be giving them, handing them out like candy in the classroom. So we need to not make the same mistake with AI. Yeah.
I like how you prefaced it with a question about, well, what is the purpose of education? What is the goal? Because we can't deny, with all technology, it's going to disrupt industries. And unfortunately, when you talk to people, they look at education as more of a utilitarian purpose, where I need to have my child get into this college to get this job. And the beauty of what you're talking about is that, what job? We don't even know what those jobs will be in 4 years or 10 years. It could be a completely different industry. Some of them will be replaced by AI, particularly anything that's hard math. I would imagine you can probably do your own taxes already without using an accountant. So all these high-paying jobs, we'll have to rethink what that's going to look like. In the meantime, what you're saying is, well, that our goal isn't necessarily to get them a job, right? We want them to be good people. We want them to be problem solvers, thinkers, and have all these things that AI can't make. And maybe that's the beauty in all this, is that it may force us to call back on that, even if you're not a religious person, even if you're atheist, you're going to look at the pragmatic of it and say, well, AI can't do things that humans can do and think the way humans can do, so that's an important skill now to learn. And I'm thinking about parents, particularly when they hear classical in the curriculum, they get scared because they equate that with not getting a job.
Yeah. No,
and
it's
I'm
good.
speaking as a parent who had come into classical type of education and knowledge, but these are normal, good people that just think this is not necessarily. I don't want my kid to be a philosopher. That's not. So
my mother didn't want me to be a philosopher either.
Exactly. So I think that's the beauty in this thing that could be looked at as something to fear. But I think that of something that like this, something really beautiful can come from it.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I there's a couple of strands of things that you said there. I mean, yeah. So one thing is that I tried to give answers. Like, frankly, I don't trust. Again, I don't know, and I'm not an expert enough to know where the technology is actually going and whether some of the kind of more bombastic language of how it's going to take over is true or not. But I try to sort of assume that AI is going to, not that it's going to take over, but that AI is going to be incredibly intelligent on some measure of intelligence, and that it really could do the thinking for us in most cases, rather than dismiss that. Let's take that critique, that option seriously. What's still left, and one of the good things about classical education is that it gets to the timeless truths, right? So what's timelessly true about humanity and distinct from humanity and animals or humanity and machines? And I think the thing that makes us distinct from animals is rationality, but the thing that makes us distinct from machines is consciousness. It's one of the things. And Aristotle's idea of practical rationality, I think, practical wisdom, because it involves the perception of objective value in the world, that's not something that AI is ever going to have. That's at least what I'm confidently saying. As smart as it could possibly be. Other thoughts? Yeah.
As you're just talking, Mayor, I'm thinking definitions between intelligence and thinking. Artificial intelligence, I think, is the wrong term. It's artificial analysis. That's all artificial intelligence can do is analyze. So I'm wondering, what's the difference in the classical approach to thinking versus the computer's approach to analysis?
Yeah, because I guess one other thing I want to say is that whatever there are those kind of pure analytic little thinking skills are also ones I think we don't want to sort of cede to them and just say they're going to do it. Like, I think we need to be developing that too. But so I don't have to think more about your question. I'm happy to kind of grant the language to the other side and say, okay, there's a kind of sense in which this is intelligence. But at least one area where what we do is different is in, again, prudence or practical wisdom. Anytime the combination of that pure sort of analytical thinking with values, right? And not just moral values, but the perception of good and bad in the world, right? But that doesn't answer your question. I have to think more about it. What's sort of unique about human thought? But again, I don't want us to put all of our eggs in the basket of, well, there's a special kind of way of thinking that we do that the machine's not going to be able to do. I think the real thing the machine's not going to be able to do is to be conscious and to perceive value. Yeah. Michelle.
Sure.
Ladies first. Oh, go ahead.
Just to the point earlier about we're educating students to get jobs.
Oh, yeah. I want to come back to that. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, and I can't remember where I read this or who said it. It might have been something Mr. Luddy sent around, but there was something recently about the number of CEOs who have a philosophy degree or background. And I just think it's interesting that in order to have that degree or background, you have to have had on some level a classical education. And one way to outsmart AI is to, like you just said, combine the analytical with the values, which is on some base level philosophy.
Yeah.
And so, therefore, is the classical education not outsmarting AI by hopefully creating more CEOs, more entrepreneurs that create valuable jobs that way, as opposed to accountants and lawyers and...
Yeah, I mean, yes, it's the great point. And I think if we're totally driven, aside from the fact that like there's more to life than getting a good job, the other point, just the pragmatic point, is if we're totally driven by the fear of like the jobs of the future, we just don't know what that's going to look like. And the great irony is that it looks like right now a lot of white-collar jobs are the ones that are going to be most threatened. Not all of them, but a lot of them. Like actually working with your hands and being outside in the short term, at least what the experts are saying, are going to be where those are going to be more stable jobs. So that's just an example. That's not to say, okay, that's just so have your kid go, whatever, learn, be a tradesman, learn woodworking per se, right? It illustrates that we just don't know yet. And so we can't be driven by just that, right? But the long-term solution, as I was trying to suggest, is that we need people, the people who are going to be, we need people in charge who are humans, right? And I don't just mean like we need a couple of people at the top, like the Elon Musk in the world. Like we want a society in which leadership and responsibility is dispersed at the very, very local level, everything from families up to the national and international level. And we want all those places to be, all those roles to be filled by human beings practicing prudence in their everyday lives, rather than on the machines and like a a very small group of tech CEOs at the very top, right, who are programming the machines, but haven't themselves, don't necessarily themselves have a lot of wisdom. That's a kind of a scary world. Anyway, well, let's not stop on that, because that was sort of dystopian where I just went with that last. Maybe one last question, it could be a practical one. Yeah.
What would you say is the strongest counter argument to the claim that a lot of these concerns we have now will be alleviated if and when we can solve the alignment problem?
What's the alignment problem?
So the alignment problem is the idea that at some point they might be able to get AI to do what we want it to do versus what it does now, which is to sometimes hallucinate.
Yeah.
And I don't agree with the argument, but I've heard it said that once we can align AI to what we want, that introduces the element of value that we can't solve for right now.
Good. Yeah. So I am personally a little bit concerned, but I'm not in this at all concerned about the AI being bad and taking over kind of thing, which is what I think a lot of those people who are thinking about what you're raising are thinking about. But okay, so suppose we can get to, it's a big if, what if we can align, okay, but let's suppose that's the case. I'm actually kind of assuming, again, I'm not assuming this dystopian future here where the robots take over or whatever, right? Suppose we can get the AI to serve our interests. Mm-hmm. My point here with this bit about prudence, this argument about prudence was, but the AI themselves, we can align how AI works with our values, but AI can't discover their own values, or they can't figure out their own values. Mm-hmm. It all has to be what we're programming in. And so there's two options, right? One is that we cede all of the division of labor thing, we cede all of the thinking and the reasoning to them, and it's just whatever we just emote, right? Whatever we feel is good, sort of initially, we just plug that into the machine and then they figure it all out. But the problem is our initial desires are often disordered. So the other alternative is we've done that work of figuring out the values that we want society to be governed by, but then we need to be prudent ourselves. Mm-hmm. So AI might be, again, it's like the chicken, once we've decided that chicken sandwiches are good, AI can figure out how to get us to Chick-fil-A, but it can't do that initial step. Mm-hmm. Yeah.